Okay, guys, we are back to the Impetus Health Podcast, and I am joined once again by Miss Geena Pitts. Geena has been on here for one podcast before, and it was just so much knowledge that we're going to do it again. And today we're going to talk with Geena, who, again, she just has this wealth of knowledge on nutrition. We're going to talk with her about a specific topic that, would you say it's the main client that you work with?
100%.
100%? Okay,
yeah.
So how would you describe this client?
Typically, I'm going to give a general age range, but I'm really bad at guessing ages, but it's 40 to 60. So
Okay.
Typically the midlife woman maybe just started the perimenopause years or fully in menopause, but
Okay.
typically that 40 to 60 age range.
40 to 60-year-old woman,
Yeah.
Who's going through a lot of changes. A lot of stuff is changing in her body for really good reasons, like it's not a bad thing. But this is Geena's client. And what she knows about this, we're going to try to hang on to some of the science she's going to give us because she knows a ton about it. But we're going to get into it a little bit. So, Geena, again, if you could kind of paint that picture, 40 to 60-year-old woman, what are they going through that's unique to that time of life?
Yeah. A lot of these women are coming to me saying, I haven't changed anything. Like everything has stayed the same. I've eaten the same. My activity is the same. And I'm starting to gain weight, usually in the abdominal region. So their body's changing. They don't know what to do about it. They feel out of control. A lot of them are new empty nesters. So kids are just going off to college. They maybe have a little bit more time to focus on themselves. So some of them are still working. Some of them don't. But they just have this newfound, hey, I can kind of take my life back because the kids are out of the house, Yeah. But just ready to make a change, but they don't know where to start because they're confused. Everything in mainstream media tells you one thing, and then you go to an article and it tells you another thing. And so they're getting 17 different voices, and they don't know even where to begin or which one's true.
Yeah. So, all right. So I'm that person, and it's happening. And I start Googling around. What are some of the things that I'm finding on Google that may be scaring me?
Yeah, I think it's a lot. And honestly, a lot of it's probably coming from their doctors. And it's not I don't want to bash the medical field in any sense, but a lot of them are hearing, well, welcome to your 40s. And that's all they have. So this is what happens. There's nothing you can do about it. Maybe they prescribe them a pill or a hormone, and good luck.
Yeah.
And that's all the advice they get. So it feels almost inevitable. It feels daunting. They're starting to have some symptoms, whether it's sleep is suffering because of hot flashes, brain fog throughout the day, just these typical symptoms that come along with perimenopause that are chalked up to hormones, and there's nothing we can do. So they almost feel like it's a dead end.
Yeah. So let's start on, I guess, the training perspective. So I know the research that I look at a ton is like power output, because power is such a good indication of whether you're going to fall or not later on in life. And just your general ability to do just about anything comes back to your power output. For men, we see pretty much a linear decrease in the amount of power we're able to put out after the age of 35, 36. We see that just linearly decrease. Women, you don't really see much of a decrease until menopause, and then it drops like a rock. But we know through research that if you are training, specifically if you're training, I mean, it can be HIIT, functional intensity training, functional fitness training, whatever it is, it doesn't have to drop like a rock. And for guys, you can almost stabilize. So women too. So what are some of the things that I guess these women could do from a training perspective that would help curve what they're about to go through?
Yeah. Primarily because I do nutrition, but I also do personal and small group training. And I would say 90% of my clients are this exact demographic.
Gotcha. Yeah.
My focus is strength training because I think there's a lot of preconceived notions with strength training. It's going to make you bulky. I don't want to look like a bodybuilder. Or let's just do something for my core so I can lose this body fat. So it's a lot of women coming in like scared to do strength training or wanting to do fat spot reduction because they have fat in their midsection and they want to get rid of it. Well, unfortunately, that's not how it works. Like fat reduction in a specific body part, you can't tell your body where to gain weight, so you can't tell where to lose weight. But we like to focus on strength training. So that's pillar one always, because that's typically just like we talked about last podcast, protein being the macronutrient that most people undereat. Strength training is the form of fitness most people neglect. And so that's the one thing we like to focus on first. Of course, cardio is important. It has great heart protective effects. So we want to do some type of cardio, but a lot of times these females, their sole passion is not fitness, right? They're not. It's hard for me to understand because I love fitness. You love fitness. We would work out 6 hours a day. You know, we would just do it if we could.
Yeah.
They don't want to. Some of
Yeah.
them don't, like, it's a struggle for them to get there. So my keys are strength training, but keeping it fun and keeping it, we do it in a way that can be completed in 45 minutes. So I don't want it to be this hour and a half production of their day that they leave and they're just a pile of sweat on the ground. I want them to leave feeling better. I want them to leave feeling energized. So it's definitely a delicate balance because you have different clients who have different preferences, but that's the benefit of having a coach or someone who can kind of, you know, give you a little bit of what you want, but also what you need.
Why are they seeing the change that they're seeing?
Yeah, like body fat accumulation.
All of it. So why are they losing power? Why is their body going through the change like it is right now?
It's all attributed to the changes in hormones, which is normal. That's natural. It's not, your body's not breaking down. That's what happens during perimenopause. Typically, to encourage people going through perimenopause, once you reach menopause, you kind of stabilize out in a new, it's a low, right? You don't have really any estrogen or progesterone anymore, but all of those symptoms kind of stable out. So it's really those 40s. The average age of perimenopause onset is 42, and that can last up to 10 years. So you could be in this weird transitional stage for 10 years where you're having these symptoms and not feeling like yourself. So I'm just passionate about giving these females the tools to minimize the symptoms. I'm not saying I'm going to eliminate them, but you can make them better. But they're seeing the changes because you're having these drastic swings in hormones. So you're still having a cycle. It's just not consistent. So you might have one every 60 days and then every 10 days and then every 3 months. And so it's, you don't know what to predict. You can't expect it. You have no way of knowing when it's coming. And so these drastic shifts of high and low estrogen followed by high and low progesterone are causing the mood swings. They're causing all of these hot flashes and night sweats and migraines that people are experiencing. So it is the hormones, but we can do lifestyle interventions that minimize it. Just like a female who's in their 20s and 30s who might have really bad symptoms during their cycle, you can minimize those with proper nutrition and lifestyle. So it's just not, it's countercultural because most of your doctors prescribe you the pill or say welcome to your 40s, when we know that you can mitigate a lot of these symptoms just through lifestyle.
Yeah. It's amazing to me what we don't know. So like even for me myself, I'm in this world of strength conditioning. This is what I do. This is fitness wise. I was in this world for a while before I knew anything about nutrition, and I had terrible nutrition. I didn't know what I was doing. I had to go learn it. Ellie has taught me a ton. You have taught me a ton, and I've learned from you guys. So like a lot of these women could, I mean, it's not like, I put it this way. When my car breaks down, I go to the mechanic and I do what the mechanic tells me to do because I don't know a thing about my car. He says, hey, you need to do this, this, and this. And by the way, hang an air freshener on your mirror. I'm going to hang the air freshener on my mirror. I'm going to do it. And I think it's the same thing for these women who go to their doctor is they're just going to do what they're told, but there's so much more to it. So what are these women who are coming to you? What do they know typically? And then what are they missing? I guess, what are they missing when they come to you?
Yeah, I think that typically with the doctors, and I can't give any advice on hormone therapy, there's a time and a place. Some people need it. Some people it is a huge help, but that is something that doctors have to consult their patients with on an individual basis. So I won't get into all of that.
Yeah.
But the doctors aren't spending the time talking about the importance of strength training in a high protein diet, which for someone who's seeing negative body composition changes, like you're going to increase midsection fat, that is because estrogen is declining. So the visceral fat, you're going to store more in your abdominal region. I don't want to say that's normal, but that's typically what people tend to see. But if we can prioritize as best as we can, getting in your 3 strength training workouts per week and hitting a protein minimum every single day, that's going to help maintain and build muscle mass, which we know helps improve your metabolic rate.
And would you call this a high protein diet that they would need to be on, or would it just be adequate protein?
I would talk to the person on an individual basis.
Yeah.
If I had someone coming to me and they were eating 30 grams of protein, we would start with the minimum.
Yeah.
I'm not going to increase someone from the minimum to the ideal or optimal level if they're starting at ground zero. If someone's starting at 90 grams, we could probably get them to their optimal level over the course of a month. So it really depends on someone's starting place. But that's why we go through a period of tracking we take their average over the
Yes.
course of a week and see where we're starting, and then make tweaks based on the starting point.
Absolutely. I wanted to bring that up though, because I don't think a lot of people who may be listening even know what a normal protein level intake
Yeah.
is. So what would you say, like, so for some, let's say a woman who weighs 120 pounds,
Yeah.
what would be a maintaining protein level for her just in general?
Yep. So maintenance, I say this is a minimum.
Yes.
The minimum amount would be 0.8 grams per pound of body weight. So 0.8 times 120, which is something, but I'm not good at math. Let's say it's 100.
Yeah, it's
100-ish.
probably gonna be around. I can just do the math real quick. Let's see.
So 120 times 0.8.
Right at 96.
Okay, so 96 grams would be the minimum protein requirement for health.
And I'm sure there's some people hearing that and being like, that is so much higher
Yeah.
than what I'm getting
Yeah.
because they probably don't know. So, but we say a high protein diet, that's going to sound incredibly high protein to a lot of people. But really, like you said, that's just the minimum of
Yep.
what we need.
Yep.
So really what you're looking for, what's the equation for like the optimal level?
I would say getting up to a gram per pound, so 120.
So 120,
So
yeah,
I would give
per
them
pound,
a
yeah.
range of the 96 to 120 grams is kind of the range you want to stay between.
Mhm.
Giving, and I also like to think that would be your daily goal. But if you're someone who has drastic fluctuations on a day-to-day basis, we also like to look at weekly averages.
Yeah.
So the goal is that your weekly average would fall between your 96 to 120 grams of protein.
Mm-hmm.
And that is truly to maintain muscle mass or build if that is someone's goal.
Where does muscle mass come into the regulation aspect of the perimenopausal woman? How does that help regulate everything?
Yeah, muscle mass is muscle is the key organ for longevity.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is going to help with every symptom downstream because I love Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, but she is like the muscle centric. I think her practice is muscle centric medicine.
Nice.
But in terms of just overall quality of life, muscle is the key to having a long, healthy life. And so if you're having all of these symptoms, there are definitely some lifestyle interventions that's not exercise that can help. But exercise and strength training is going to be the primary way that we start to see our bodies kind of adapt. I had one client specifically who had terrible migraines, and we shifted her diet to a higher protein approach. And she also works out quite a bit. So we had to have some conversations around carbs.
Mm-hmm.
And she primarily switched from running herself into the ground. She literally would run 5 days a week to 4 days a week of strength training. And she rarely gets a migraine anymore.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So what I love about this is it's not coming out of left field. These are fundamental things.
Yeah.
Like I tell people all the time in physical therapy, like strength, if pain is the iceberg in the ocean, strength is the resilience. It's the water levels. So if we can get strong enough, we can raise your water levels high enough to where we just cover up that iceberg. This issue that you're having isn't going to be an issue because you're strong enough to be resilient against it. It
Yeah.
sounds like it's the same thing. Like you're building a resilient body to deal with all these changes.
Yep.
Which is great because it's not some quick, okay, you do this quick thing here, you do this little trick here. It's none of that. It comes back to fueling. Like,
Yep.
are you fueling your body appropriately? And are you training well enough for a healthy lifestyle?
Yeah, and the cool thing with this age range, yes, it's a unique population of people, right? Not if you're a female, you're going to go through these years. So that's why it's so important. Like you can't escape it, right? It's not like having a baby. Not every female goes through that process, but every female is going to go through perimenopause and menopause, whether that's surgical or whether that's just the normal process. But the thing is, it's not like you're an alien species. I try to tell them that. Like, yes, you're unique in a certain way, but you're not so different that we treat you like a different entity, right? The same rules still apply. But now where when you were 20, you could get away with 80% adherence to your diet. When you're 50, it might have to be closer to 90, right? So there's still wiggle room. It's not like you have to be perfect 100% of the time because I'm so confident that perfection just kills any progress because if all you can be is perfect, the second you're not, it's like the wheels come off, right?
Yeah.
So where 80% could get you results before, it might look like 90% now. So it's not that you're doing a million different things. You're just getting really, really good and consistent with the things you were doing before.
Doing the basics. Doing the basics. What are some signs and symptoms that a woman is starting to go through this phase? Like they're just starting to get into it. What would be some things that she would notice? Hey guys, I have the privilege today to tell you about Vulcan Nutrition. It is a branch of our company that they do exactly what's in the name. They handle nutrition. Our phrase for Vulcan Nutrition is enhance what fuels you. It is not a fad diet. It is not some random thing that you're doing that you see someone else do. This is how to appropriately fuel your body based individually off of who you are and how you operate. If you're listening to this podcast with Geena and I right now, Geena is one of our nutritionists for Vulcan Nutrition. You could work with her. She is so intent on the individual. One cookie cutter nutrition regimen does not work for everyone. It has to be adapted for you so that you can use it for the rest of your life. This is not something that you do, for a couple months, you pick up some diet template, you do it for a few months. This is something that you can take the things that you're learning through Vulcan Nutrition and apply them to the remainder of your life so you can live the healthiest possible life as you can and be ready for anything. So if you're interested in learning more about nutrition, our team at Vulcan Nutrition, they do a free discovery call. You can see that on the website. I'll put it in the description. And they'll take a few minutes to just talk to you about what your goals are, what you're trying to do from a nutrition perspective, and what you would like to get out of living a more nutritious lifestyle. And then you can weigh it from there and decide what you want to do. And it's a great way to set a goal. It's a great way to identify what you actually want to do, as well as doing one of these free discovery calls. So check them out. Vulcan Nutrition is the company. They can help you tremendously get your life, put it back in your hands, and help you to choose a better way to live. So you can continue listening to this podcast. We're going to continue to talk about how important nutrition is. But at the end of the day, what you put inside your body matters, and it's going to set you up for the rest of your life.
Inconsistency with cycles is the main one. So typically in a healthy menstruating female, you will have very consistent window, like every 28 days. When that starts to shift by more than 2 to 3 days, that's a good indicator that those years may be approaching. Another really common symptom, and over 80% of females typically experience them, is hot flashes. That's probably the secondary symptom that I see a lot in sleep disturbances. So if you're starting to feel those things occur, it could be a sign that those years are approaching. But just like we preach about managing stress to the average person, I mean, we know that in today's society, we lead very stressful lives. It does not look like our ancestors, right, hunting and gathering, killing animals, but we have stress in a different way. And our bodies don't differentiate between those things. They just know it's stress. During this season, being able to regulate your stress becomes even more important, because those hormones, estrogen and progesterone, are almost like regulators of our stress. And when those start to ride the roller coaster, you probably have, PMS symptoms are common as you're growing up. Well, as you go into perimenopause, not being able to essentially mood swings, like you're crazy for a day and then you're kind of back to yourself again, become very predominant. But it's because you don't know how to regulate your stress. And so I like to call it soothing your nervous system. It's Dr. Laura Brydon kind of claimed that term. But it's finding things to essentially activate your parasympathetic nervous system. Because if you're always stressed out, you're in this sympathetic drive. Yeah. So you are in this fight or flight mode. You're go, go, go. Some people just have that tendency personality-wise. So it's finding activities to be able to almost down-regulate yourself into a state of more relaxation, because that is good to minimize your stress as much as possible during these years.
That's good. That's interesting. So other than proper nutrition, other than exercise, what are some of the tips that you give to these women for that?
Sleep is huge. And I know, and I even kind of sleep's important. You know what I mean? I like to sleep 8 hours, but it becomes very, very important during this transitional season. It's almost like when you're growing up and you're going through puberty, how you see teenagers kind of sleep 10, 12 hours. Yeah. Well, think about menopause as a second puberty. It's almost the reverse of what happens during puberty. So you might be having these, nights where you need more sleep because now your sleep is broken, right? You're having these sleep disturbances. You're waking up. Your heart palpitations is another symptom that females tend to have sometimes. But sleep is so important. So I like to talk to my clients about establishing a sleep hygiene routine. So just like you have a morning routine, you wake up, you brush your teeth, you make some coffee, Same thing in the afternoon or the evening. What do you do before you go to bed? Are you on your phone for 2 hours? If so, that's the first thing that we'll talk about.
Yeah.
So it's an individual basis, but it's setting up like an hour before bed. What's your routine? What does that look like? How can we down regulate and get ourselves into a really good state to have a restful sleep that night?
Yeah, I know we tell people this all the time. If we've seen people in physical therapy, if they're hurting, our rule of thumb for hurting is if you're able to sleep, try not to take anything. But if it's affecting your sleep, take something, because 75% of our human growth hormone is secreted when we sleep. And HGH is just your pure recovery tool. It fuels everything else. So absolutely. Do you, when working with these women and they're going through this, what are some of the symptoms? Those are early stage symptoms. What are some of the symptoms that they're in the middle of it? They're in the mix of it. What are, if you could just list them out, what are some of the things they may be experiencing?
They really don't change in terms of what the symptom is, but the intensity of the symptom will change. So like the hot flashes can be more severe, lasting longer, more intense, maybe during the day instead of during the night, right? Migraines can last days. The heart palpitations is another one. So those are the main ones: migraines, brain fog. And typically people who have more hot flashes experience greater brain fog. And that's because you have to think about going back to sleep. Sleep is where our brain kind of rests, resets. When you have hot flashes, it disturbs like essentially your thermal regulation in your brain, well, your entire body. And so you're overheating specific centers in your brain, which can lead to brain fog. And it's also why dementia becomes even more prevalent after menopause.
Yeah. Okay, so pre and post, you're a woman, you're in your 30s. And this is I'm truly asking, does what you do now matter before you hit menopause?
Yeah, 100%. These, just like I said, when you could be 80% consistent before, now maybe you have to be 90.
Yeah.
These are the tools right now in your 20s and 30s. You are setting yourself up for success, right? We know after the age of 30, muscle mass declines, sarcopenia. So if you can build and maintain good muscle mass, good muscle health through your 20s, 30s, 40s, you're setting yourself up to have a more successful, less symptomatic perimenopause and menopause time, which I think is the goal. I mean, I think that's the goal for most people. Like, I don't want to have sleep disturbances when I'm 40 and waking up dripping sweat. So what can I do now to be successful is be really good about all of the habits we've just talked about.
What if you're the woman and you're listening to this and you're in your 60s and you're thinking, I missed all this and I'm weak, I'm having a tough time. What should she do?
Well, I hope if she's in her 60s, she's maybe out of the symptomatic stages, right?
Absolutely.
But that doesn't mean that gaining muscle mass and focusing on those things is now irrelevant. It makes it even more important because your quality of life will still continue to decline. Your metabolic rate. This is the cool thing about metabolism. When people say my metabolism slowed down after I had kids and now I just can't lose the weight, or they think after their 30s it just is shot. Your metabolism does not change until you are 60. So these age-related declines really don't happen until those like post-menopause years. The reason you feel like your metabolism is suffering is because you've neglected building muscle, right? So now that BMR is lower because you don't have muscle mass, your NEAT has decreased significantly. I don't think people realize that they're gaining weight because when they were in their 30s, they had kids they were chasing. They had houses they had to pick up. They had, to and from practices and running around trying to get everything together. Your life might be a little bit slower now. So you're sitting more. Maybe you're reading. Maybe you're so it's not, again, in their mind, they're not thinking they decreased their activity. But typically the gain in weight that people experience during their 50s is not related to a decrease in metabolism. It's because of a decrease in activity.
Ah, gotcha. Okay. So, and this may be a little too deep, but I'm really curious. What do the estrogen levels, the progesterone levels, what do they look like for someone who is training, who is eating appropriately versus someone who isn't? And particularly going through this phase of life.
Okay.
Or after.
Yeah. So the estrogen and progesterone levels will still fluctuate. So training and eating properly are not going to negate the fact that they're going to change because that, like we said, that's a natural process that's going to happen. But what happens when you have muscle mass is kind of like what you were talking about, like your threshold essentially for pain and symptoms diminishes a little bit. So this is almost masking how intense symptoms are because now you have a greater elevation in muscle mass, which helps to mitigate some of those symptoms that you would have noticed otherwise.
Yeah.
So when we talk about muscle being very important, we're not just saying for aesthetics, we're truly saying for all of health. Like every single metric and measure of health can be improved by gaining muscle.
Yeah.
And I'm very confident saying that.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
I love that's true. And that's what I'm saying. It's the fundamental things. It's true. It's true in everything.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Okay. So I guess in kind of a closing scenario here, what would you say to a woman who's going through this? Because it's got to, I mean, it's those symptoms that you brought up are pretty extreme symptoms when you really break it down. But this is, like you said, it's going to happen to, I think there's more women on the earth than there is men. So maybe over half of the population of the earth will experience this at some point. What do you say to the woman who is in the middle of it right now and she hasn't done any of this, but she's going through all this? What do you say to her?
Yeah, I think you can change where you're at. And that's the really cool thing about this is if you're having terrible symptoms, like you are in the driver's seat, right? You have control over how severe these symptoms are and you can make changes. So if you're not in your 20s and 30s, which is the best time to make a change, the next best time is now. So if you're in your 40s, you can still make these small changes. So if I were someone who hadn't done anything in the past and I was already starting to undergo these symptoms, I would first start by figuring out my minimum protein requirement and a strength training goal. And I think if you just focus on those two things, because I know the temptation is to do 20 things at once, but if you could take this in bite-sized pieces, you have the control to determine your symptoms. If you continue to perpetuate the belief that this is just how menopause is, I'm just going to have these symptoms, my life is over, you're missing out on your best years. You still have, in a sense, half your life left for most of these people. Half of your life left. And if that's what you believe to be true, oftentimes your symptoms are worse. And I think about it like this. Remember, like, when you were growing up or if you have kids, if they fall and hurt themselves, you're like, oh, you're okay. You're okay. And they would stand up and be like, yeah, I'm okay. You know, they're okay. But if you're like, oh my gosh, are you okay? And they start to cry.
Yeah.
And then they might not even actually need to cry, but your reaction kind of determines how they felt. And so I almost feel the same thing with these females going through perimenopause. Their doctors are just like, oh, welcome to 40. This sucks.
Yeah.
And so now they're just like, oh, shoot, this does suck. And everything else becomes, their symptoms become worse. Everything they believe to be true about menopause actually manifests because that's what they think is going to happen. But if you can fight against that, and it really does take some deep work. You can't just be like, okay, I'm going to do these things. You have to do the deep mental work to make that mindset change. But you can still have the best years. It's not a death sentence.
That is good. And that's got to be encouraging to a lot of these ladies. Like, I know, like, for the people that we're seeing a lot, they're going through an injury, like, I get the question a lot, what do I need to do right now? And it's right. It sounds so cliche, but it's really about the choices that you make. You can choose to, I don't want to say fight, menopause. You're not going to fight it, but you can choose to either lay down and just give up, or you can choose to really, I guess the word is fight. Like you can fight against it and you can have a better life, a better outcome. You don't have to have the drastic stuff. You can mask a lot of these stuff. And I think it's beautiful because the other option is to just lay down and just say, I'm just going to be miserable. Yeah. And you don't have to be. Yeah. Embracing, I think, is a good way to think about it. Embrace the change, but know that it shouldn't feel unbearable. It's not something that should feel like your life is over. Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Okay. Awesome. Well, guys, if you have any questions about this, again, I'm going to put Geena's information in the description and you can reach out to her and you can learn more about Mastering Midlife, which is going to be so good. But yeah, thanks guys for watching. And Geena, thank you so much for doing this again. I appreciate it. Yeah. See y'all.